I think the point that you make here, me as the bystander on the outside still have connections to LSU because I'm doing this show with you, that a lot of our listeners are LSU fans. Look, I'm not picking Florida State the way that I picked Utah to beat Florida or TCU to beat Colorado. Not going to sit here and bang on the table and say this game is going to be a blowout. Both of these teams, we spent so much time talking about the players, the coaches, everything about both of these rosters the whole offseason because they justifiably were in the spotlight. They dominated the transfer portal. They're bringing back some of the best players in the country, both of these teams. It could go either way, and I think that this game is going to be a nail-biter. It is going to be a very close, hard-fought battle. But when I pulled up both of these teams and I look at them and I compare matchups, offensive line versus defensive line, quarterback versus secondary, all those things, receivers versus secondary, who's got the better running backs, I was so fixated. And I actually almost picked LSU. That was my original gut check decision, was I was going to put down LSU, and that was going to be my pick final. But I had this lingering thought that I can't go with that because of my concerns and questions that I have about LSU secondary. Now, this game, we could show up and LSU secondary could look amazing. And I'm going to immediately be eating my words if things go according to plan. But because I'm unsure, I can't commit to a pick that I have uncertainty in. So I think Florida State will win this football game by a very slight margin if it comes down to an important passing play at the end of the game, and there's a completion that keeps Florida State in the victory column.
All right, what would be your score prediction then?
I feel like it's going to be high scoring. I mean, I didn't write down a score prediction, but I feel like, maybe something like 38-35. I feel like both these teams have such good receivers that there's just going to be so much offense.
All right, I don't disagree with your logic, right? I don't think you said anything wrong, Joe. I do think if, with do you watch Marvel movies?
Yes.
Now they have like the multiverse and different dimensions. Okay. LSU and Florida State are mirror images of each other, just maybe in different dimensions. Okay. Both have 5-year senior plus quarterbacks. Both return a lot of offensive linemen. Both have really good wide receivers. Both have really good defensive linemen. Both have a defensive tackle that is out for this game that nobody 2 weeks ago thought would be out of this game. When I look at these matchups, and this matchup specifically, I do think LSU's offensive line is built better this year to protect Jayden Daniels than they were a year ago. They had a true freshman at left tackle that started, Cam Wire, who was at right tackle, is now at Tulane. He gave up 3 sacks in that game. It was not really fair to Jayden Daniels to ask him to run out there and say, save us, but he almost did. I do agree with you that I do think that this game is going to be high scoring. Here's why. That game was not great last year. Both teams had missed opportunities. Multiple times Florida State couldn't score in the red zone. LSU fumbled or muffed 2 punts. Florida State would get the ball back. But Jayden Daniels did go 99 yards against Florida State and scored there at the end. They missed the extra point. I'm with you. I think it's going to be a high-scoring game. With everything being even, I go Jayden Daniels to get him over the hump. I go coaching staff to get him over the hump. I do think Jayden Daniels is better than Jordan Travis, and I do believe that Brian Kelly and his staff are better than what Mike Norvell and his staff is. I know Alex Atkins is good. I know they have a very competent staff. But I can't believe that I had to tell a Notre Dame guy this. Brian Kelly's a better coach than Mike Norvell is.
Okay.
And I do believe when you have two teams that are eerily similar, the coach that is better prepared and maybe has more athletes here and there, they win those games. Joe, Brian Kelly wrote a lot of the wrongs that he had at Notre Dame last November when he beat Nick Saban at home in Baton Rouge. He wrote a lot of wrongs. A lot of people had written him off that he couldn't beat Nick Saban. Joe, we act like they were a bad team last year. They were 11-2. The only reason they were 11-2 and didn't win the West is because of Brian Kelly. I think that Jayden Daniels leads LSU to a victory. I think that Brian Kelly leads them to the victory, and they're going to trade punches all night long. I don't think either team's going to have massive amounts of success early running the football, but whatever team leans on each other and is more conditioned, more disciplined at the end is going to win this. I've already made my prediction. I think it's 38-31 LSU. If it came down to it, and you put a gun in my head and said, Blake, do you think Florida State can win this game? Well, Joe, I picked them to make it in the playoff. It's the only loss that I have on their schedule. I think they can beat Clemson twice. I don't know. Flip a coin. But I do think LSU does have an advantage in certain areas that matter, and that's why I picked LSU.
I think that's actually a really good point. It's kind of funny that you would think that this game maybe we'd be yelling at each other more about, but it's one of the few instances I think where we can sit down here and we can both acknowledge where certain sides of the coin are going to be factored into this game. And I understand what you're talking about there with the coaching staff. And that was originally why my gut was so close to relying on and going with LSU, is that they've got a battle-tested head coach who has actually won important big football games in Brian Kelly. As much as I joke about Brian Kelly being bad at preparing his teams for big time matchups and being a Notre Dame fan and having seen him screw up games like this time and time again, he still has wins in important games. And the Alabama game is pretty recent. That is a lot of momentum, and the momentum that they have in the offseason with that coaching staff is going to help them set up for this victory. Here's one thing that really, I said this on another show, and I kind of want to bring it up. Kind of has nothing to do with the game, but it does. I'm going to be so pissed if this game is lopsided one way or the other. I'm going to be so upset if this isn't a really good game like last year, because last year was really fun. It was chaotic and it was hectic. I know it was stressful for you and it didn't go the way that you wanted it to. But if this game doesn't live up to the hype being as good of a matchup it is, I'm going to be so sad. So sad.
J-Rock AZ says that it's Jordan Travis by a long shot.
They're pretty close to one another.
But here's
like
the thing,
mirror images of one another.
Jayden Daniels was 266 for 388 last year, 69% completion percentage. Jordan Travis was 64% completion percentage. Daniels had 2,913 passing yards. Travis had 3,214. Jayden had 17 passing touchdowns, 1 receiving, 3 interceptions. Travis had 24. Daniels rushed net rushing yards for 1,207 yards and 11 touchdowns, accumulating 29 total. Travis had 82 carries, 417 yards, 7 TDs on the ground, 31 total. Everybody that continues to come in here, and I've seen it on Twitter, Florida State fans are really confident in this game. And I had to go off on them last night. They were still on the show. Joe, I had 182 comments at the end of my AYS show last night. 2/3 of them are from Florida State fans.
Really?
Yeah. All of them saying that they're going to blow out LSU. Sounds good.
All right.
The one thing that bothers me the most is that LSU understands what Jordan Travis is and how good he can be. The simple nature that these freaking Rudy Poos can't do that for Jayden sounds good. But there's a reason he's number 2 in the Heisman Trophy odds. They're damn near identical, Joe. The eye in the sky doesn't lie. You can put their stats up against one another. They are almost identical every year. Every year. So do you Rudy Poo Florida State fans, I know that you can't read, some of you, and you don't have teeth. Look at the fucking sheet. Like, we see them in here. Like, I don't understand fans that cannot read numbers. Anyway.
Well, it's also
tonight.
Pull up the tape and I picked the Florida State, by the way, before anyone jumps down my throat in the comments. But if you pull up the tape and you watch both of them, they both have similar strengths and they both have similar deficiencies. One of them is not drastically better than the other. The only difference is one's got a better running back and maybe a better second receiver to go to, and that being Jordan Travis. So if one has a better game, it's going to be Travis because he's got the better supporting cast, if anything. It's not going to be because he's the better quarterback.
Well, and I can make the argument that LSU has a better offensive line than Florida State's. I do think LSU's O-line's built to sustain taking on the D-line like that. So you know, they say, well, Jared Verse went off of last year. Yeah, he faced a guy that didn't play after that. Joe, Cam Wire, the starting right tackle, did not not only did he not start another game, he didn't play in another game. Like
he transferred?
Yeah, he transferred to Tulane. Like, listen to what I'm saying.
Why did he play that game?
Huh?
Why did he play that game then?
Because the true freshman Emory Jones, I don't think that they thought was ready enough to take on a guy like Jared Verse. First game as a true freshman. He starts coming in against Southern, starts coming in against New Mexico, and then after New Mexico, it went off from there. He never looked back. Joe, he didn't play another game. Like, literally did not see the field and was still on the team. So we'll see. I do think that this has a lot of implications for the playoff because, listen, there's no margin for error for the team that loses. There's no wiggle room if you lose to get to the playoff for either one of these teams. I know that a lot of people say, well, Florida State still has Clemson. But I would rather, if it were me, I would rather have to face Clemson twice than to go through that SEC gauntlet. If you told me, like, which one I would rather do, go through Alabama and Georgia to get to the playoff or go through Clemson twice, I'd rather go through Clemson twice. Why would I want to go through Alabama and Georgia to have to get there? And God knows, God willing, what happens if Tennessee gets in there and their offense is doing good things under Joe Milton. We'll have to wait and see about that. But what if that happens? The losing team has no margin for error, and it's a crucial game. That's what makes this game so big. A lot of people think both of these teams can make the playoff, and that is what Sunday in prime time is going to all be about.
I actually push back a little bit on who can get hurt the most by this. I think, as you said, LSU has, I think, the most to lose if they lose this football game, because then there is zero margin for error for them the rest of the season. I think that if Florida State loses, though, that's actually, you know, we talk about when it comes time to pick these teams, it doesn't become quality wins, it becomes quality losses. I think it looks really damn good if you're Florida State. If LSU is your one singular loss and you beat Clemson twice, that gets them into the playoffs.
Oh, they're in. They're in.
That gets them in.
Especially if LSU were to run the table and win the SEC.
Exactly my point. Even if they don't, even if like they finish with 3 losses and they just barely missed the playoff, that loss still looks really, really good on Florida State's resume. So I think that because of the softness of the ACC schedule, it does in a way help them if they lose this game, that they could then run the table. I mean, TCU made it with 1 loss, and their singular loss was the team that won the Big Ten championship game, or Big 12 rather. Yeah.
Right. And here's another crazy thing, Joe. They didn't move. They lost and didn't move in the rankings. That's what, that's a different topic for a different day. I'm going to say 38-31 LSU. You have 38-35 Florida State.